right now the problem with systemic racial inequality within, let's say, the justice system, within policing, and the way we've seen it is that it isn't just about individual officers, it's about a culture within policing and a system within law enforcement that really encourages abuse and makes it hard for good, conscientious officers to do the right thing and to stop and to challenge their associates. So I think what we've got to do is begin to move towards really, to be honest with you, self-determination in these communities. That is to say, that people in low-income communities, and not just low-income communities of color, white ones as well, of which there are many such communities around the country, I think should be empowered to decide who's going to police their streets. I'm tired of those decisions being made by folks who are not elected, who don't live in the community, just because somebody can fire a gun, just because somebody can run a certain speed. Oh, well, then you're physically fit to be an officer. Yeah, but you may not be emotionally, conceptually fit to be an officer in that community. So I think we need to move to a situation where officers, for instance, let's just think about this, and obviously we'd have to tease this out, but what if officers had to spend the first 90 days on the force without a gun, without the ability to arrest, but walking the neighborhood, getting to know people, sitting in their barbershops, sitting in their churches, sitting on their front porch stoop, getting to know the people, going door to door, asking the people, what do you need us to do and what do you need us not to do? How can we work with you? In other words, spend the first 90 days as an organizer, not as an enforcer. As an organizer, not as a military representative of an occupation. And then at the end of that 90 days, if I've been walking the streets getting to know the people in that community, then the community ideally should get to decide whether I'm fit to be a cop, because they're the ones who are going to be affected. And if I come in with a sense of humility and justice, they'll probably say, hey, I like that guy. And if I come in with an attitude that I'm here to crack some heads, they'll be like, nah, I don't think that's the one. And then ultimately they get to make the call. Ideally, we would probably prefer, residency requirements, but we know that's not always possible. It's not, you're not always going to find somebody in Ferguson that wants to be a cop, right? And you're not going to necessarily have enough housing stock, affordable housing stock, and room for people to just move in. But at the very least, let's let the people in the community make the call. That's going to be better, not just for them, that's going to be better for the officer. Because if I'm the officer and I've gotten to know you, you're not going to fear me and see me as an occupier that way, because you saw the pictures of my kids that I had in my wallet, and I saw the picture of your kids that you had in your wallet. See, and so now we have a relationship. We've really got to move away from this sort of top-down management style that we often do to solve these problems, and realize the problems can be solved by the community if we are brave enough to empower them. And by the way, I think the community also ought to have some say in who's going to teach their children. Because just because you got a degree and you got 5 weeks of training with Teach for America, none of which dealt with race and class and equality, does not prepare you to come in and teach my children. And that's not meant as an insult to some fine teachers that come through TFA, but that model does not prepare you to come into a space that you couldn't find on a map. You have to Google the neighborhood because you don't even know where it is. Well, where am I going? I don't know, over there. You had 5 weeks of training. Good luck. Like, the community should be able to sit down with that teacher, whether it's a 30-year veteran or a new person, and size them up, and then they get to determine whether you get to teach my child algebra or whether you get to teach them reading in 3rd grade. Because if you don't have the sensibility to do that, you can do damage. So I just want us to move in a direction where we're empowering the disempowered, the marginalized, to make those calls for themselves.
And if we use Tim's example, then it requires this threshold determination that the person who walks through that door as an unarmed officer who's really getting to know the community in 90 days assumes that everyone in that community, or the majority, because everyone isn't, but the majority of people in that community are law-abiding people. Right. And when you walk in with that assumption, that you walk in the school with the assumption that the majority of the kids are there to learn, and the majority of their parents sent them there to learn, that frames everything you do from day one.